Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to In-Depth Looksie Codex Skitarii Part 8. And we're looking at the Sicarian Ruststalkers and the Sicarian Infiltrators in this part. So just like with the Vanguard and the Rangers, I'm going to cover one unit then the other fully, and then I'll give you closing thoughts. But before doing that, I want to give you kind of the origin of the Sicarian stuff, because the origin for the two of them is exactly the same, much like how the Skitarii base fluff for the Vanguard and the Rangers are exactly the same. So Sicarians once started their life as Skitarii according to the fluff, and were basically horribly mutilated in battle, nearly killed, blown limb from limb, you know, the typical thing. And if the tech priests essentially deemed them still fit to serve, they were transformed into Sicarians. So it's a pretty painful origin story, you could say, and that's for both of them. And be it Ruststalker or Infiltrator, they are essentially blown up Skitarii. It's quasi similar to a Dreadnought origin story with Space Marines, only for Space Marines that's viewed as an honor, and it's very rare for it to happen, and they don't have many Dreadnought chassis. For the Sicarians, in terms of the Skitarii army, it's much more frequent, and it's not so much an honor, it's just deemed you're still fit, you can still serve, you're going to type of deal. Very much efficient in the eyes of the machine when you think about it. Is the part broken? Kinda. Is it repairable and can it work? Yeah, it can. Alright, use it type of deal. So that's their origin. So let's look at first the Ruststalkers. Now the Ruststalkers and the Infiltrators are essentially elite choices if you're going to go with the whole battle-forged army, which is what I'm a fan of doing anyway. And their point costs are higher. Their point cost is decently higher than that of the Rangers and the Vanguard, but I don't feel they're overpriced. I think they're decently priced for what you get. So looking at the Sicarians, Ruststalkers in this case, their weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, and initiative is that of a Space Marine, Tactical Marine. Their toughness is that of a Skitarii. They have 2 wounds, they have 2 attacks, and they have a leadership of 8. Now their armor save is 4+ because of their battle armor. Their unit type is infantry, and the Princeps, which is an interesting choice considering we're used to seeing Princeps as part of the Titan crew, but the Princeps is used as a nomer here for the squad leader, has the exact same stat line except the Princeps has 3 attacks and a leadership of 9, and is considered a character. So for your initial points investment, you get 4 Ruststalkers and 1 Princeps. They have Sicarian battle armor, transonic razor, cord claw, and mine scrambler grenades as war gear. You can include up to 5 additional Ruststalkers in the squad. The Princeps may take items from the special issue war gear and the Relics of Mars lists, and the only thing that the Ruststalker Princeps can't take from the Relics of Mars is the Fox Phoenix pistol. The entire squad may replace their transonic razors, cord claws, and mine scrambler grenades with 2 transonic blades. A Ruststalker Princeps with 2 transonic blades may also take a cord claw, so the Ruststalker Princeps can get the cord claw back, and a Ruststalker Princeps may take a prehensile data spike. Now, special rules wise, they're bulky. They have the Doctrina Imperatives, of course. They have Doomstrider, which is handy. They have Feel No Pain and Furious Charge. Now, the Ruststalkers, fluff-wise, are monsters. They're sinister killing machines. They were first invented by the tech priests of Mars to deal with the wastelands, deal with feral servitors and things like that, and anything deemed, I guess, worth killing and gone, missing type of deal because you deemed them worth killing, is going to be killed by the Ruststalkers. The Ruststalkers were so effective at dealing with the excommunicated and the feral servitors and other undesirables that they were turned into a militarized unit. So they're assassiny in terms of that they hunt down and kill you, but they're not really stealthy or anything like that. They're quick, and they really are monstrous. They shriek. Their weapons shriek because they're transonic and they shiver. They have pretty good speed. They're not mindless killers, they're just driven to murderlust. They howl in triumph. They're really kind of bestial in nature. So, pretty effective melee shock killers, you could say. And that definitely, I would say, is a good way to describe them. They're like shock troops, but purely melee style, and more of a, not just a really good melee killer, but also pretty good, I would assume, especially with the fluff of them, psychologically, because they're tearing things limb from limb, and they're really good at going after elites. They're elite killers. They're gonna go after things like Terminators, mega armored knobs, anything else that's really heavily armored. Artificer armor, of course. They'll go after things like powered armored marines, like space marines, of course. They're really good at dealing with the more elite, heavily armored infantry, because they're really good at bypassing armor saves. So that's kind of their shtick, and they're more monstrous about it than maybe other forces of the Mechanicum would be. So with that being said, we're looking at the Sicarian Infiltrators now, and now the Infiltrators are also points heavy. Their stat lines for their Infiltrators and the Princeps is exactly the same as the Ruststalkers, because they're also Sicarians. Their war gear is a little bit more bare bones. Sicarian battle armor, just like the Ruststalkers, of course, but then they only have stub carbine and a power sword. Now, you can include up to 5 additional Infiltrators. The Princets may also take items from the special issue war gear and the Relics of Mars list, but there's no prohibited items from the Relics of Mars list for these guys. The entire squad may replace their stub carbines, power swords with flechette blasters and taser goads. So the stub carbines and power swords can be replaced by flechette blasters and taser goads if you want to. And the Infiltrator Princets may take an Info Slave skull. Special rules, they get a decent amount. They're bulky. They have the Doctrine of Imperatives, of course. They also have Dune Strider, which is nice. They have Feel No Pain. They have Infiltrate. They have Stealth, and they have Neurostatic Aura, which does all enemy models within 6 inches of one or more models with this special rule. They subtract 1 from their weapon skill, ballistic skill, initiative, and leadership, basically because they're so disoriented. And that's the Sicarian Infiltrators. Where the Ruststalkers are these borderline monster, very bestial, murdering machines of death. These more machine than man, murder lust units that are just out there to hack things limb from limb with savage glee. The Infiltrators are a bit more cold and calculating. They're also pretty sinister because they just exude that aura that really is going to disorient the enemy, and the enemy may not even know what's going on, and then they're killed. So they have that type of sinisterness going on with them. These guys, I find, are a much more precise tool and achieve a different result than the Ruststalkers. What's interesting for me is that the Ruststalkers are these really wild, not so much reckless abandon, but murder lust induced killing units, but the Ruststalkers are really good at dealing with the anti-elite type infantry. The Infiltrators are much more precise, but they're much better at dealing with the more horde-like infantry. So where the Ruststalkers can deal with things like power armor or better very well, the Infiltrators can deal with things like power armor or worse very, very well, depending upon their loadout. But they have the stealth, they have the infiltrate. They're basically, their fluff is that they can bypass enemy defenses with ease. They can close in, they can achieve objectives, kill things in their way, and go about that business of warfare. So again, pretty cool. Just like the Ruststalkers, I find pretty cool. But for me personally, the Infiltrators fit a bit better from my personal playstyle. If I were to collect a force, I would consider the Infiltrators over the Ruststalkers. Would I consider Ruststalkers? Maybe, but I definitely would give more consideration off the bat to Infiltrators personally. And if you keep them in their stock configuration, the stub carbine's decent, and the power sword is, of course, going to work well for things that are in power armor or worse armor. It'll just cut through that stuff no problem. If you sub out for the flechette blasters and the taser goads, you're really not going to do too well against that power armor. No better than a standard close combat weapon, but with the taser's ability to get a lot more hits because of the taser special rule, and with the flechette blasters dealing more shots potentially than the stub carbine, what you have is something really good at dealing with horde at this point. They can really shoot through and cleave through horde infantry who have really bad armor save. Things like termagants, things like hormagants, things like orc boys. You can even deal pretty well with things that are not too good in close combat, like fire warriors, maybe certain Imperial Guard squads. Stuff like that can be dealt with pretty well with taser goads and flechette blasters. And I think the Infiltrators combo really well with the Vanguard. So if you do a two-pronged assault type of deal, you can have the neurostatic aura rule in effect on the unit, as well as the rad saturation rule in effect with that unit, and really potentially go to town against them. So I like that combo-ness. I'm sure there's combos for the Ruststalkers as well. They could always benefit from comboing with the rad saturation rule also. So I'm not saying one's exclusive over the other. I just like the combo of the Sicarian Infiltrators with the Skitarii Vanguard. So that's really it for both of them. The fluff, of course, of the Ruststalkers is that they're much more of a murderlust, just rip it to shreds type of unit, where the Infiltrators are a bit more precise. They're the unit you would say, hey, infiltrate that enemy compound and overload its reactor, let's say, where the Ruststalkers would be, hey, rip through the enemy encampment and kill the high command. You know, that would be kind of the Ruststalkers deal, where they would just rip through everything to shreds with murderous glee, where the Infiltrators could get a similar mission, but you know, I would trust the Infiltrators more to actually infiltrate things and sabotage like that, fluff-wise, of course. So with that being said, what I find interesting is a couple of things. A, the Mind Scrambler grenades are only seen on the Ruststalkers in this codex, nowhere else. The data spikes only seen here as well. And for the Infiltrators, they're the only ones that get the Info Slave Skull as an upgrade. I also find the bulky rule interesting. Now, it's nice because it definitely clearly states what these units are like if you're going to ally with this codex and maybe want to put them in a transport. I get that. Me personally, I haven't seen very many people who ally in their army list put allied units in the other army's transports. I've never really seen that happen much at all. I'm sure it can, I just never seen it done and never done it myself. So I find bulky interesting. When I look at that and I look at the fact that we have two different units that have two different things that are really unique to them, and in the case of the Ruststalkers, they have two things that are unique to them, the grenades and the data spike. And then we look at the Infiltrators and they have the Info Slave Skull. While not unheard of in other codices, for this one being only 7 units, again, like I stated in part 2 with my theory, I really do feel like this was part of a greater codex, where maybe bulky would have been much more of an important rule for them to have, because there would have been transport options in that bigger, more encompassing Mechanicum book. And maybe other units that were not Skitarii had access to the prehensile data spike, maybe access to those grenades, maybe access to the Info Slave Skull. It just feels like that would be a very reasonable thing to think, judging by the way this codex is and judging by the ideas what the Mechanicum is overall with their complete military. So anyways, that's it for this part 8 with the Ruststalkers and the Infiltrators. In part 9, I'll be tackling the Iron Strider Ballistari and the Sidonian Dragoons, and then after that will be the next part, which would be the Doom Crawlers, and essentially that'll be the entire codex. So we're getting there. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for sticking through it. Hope you've enjoyed, and until the next